trouble. G'day, legends. Time for another Jim Does SuperCoach with your mate Jimmy here from NBA Straya. Another quick one today for the NBA Supercoach show. Mainly because I've got to go sort out some squids, but also, mostly, I got my head kicked in this week on the SuperCoach court. It was a disaster. So, very quickly, we're going to hit on how week 20 went, some trade targets, a bit of schedule stuff, but really, absolute carnage in SuperCoach land this week. Not just AFL, but obviously NBA as well. So, I ended up with a disastrous 957 this week after, a 1260 plus last week, whatever, which dropped me 163 places overall, down to 765. And look, I think a lot of other people were obviously affected by the very similar injuries, etc. But I think my conflagration of NBA players, it all went sideways. So we're talking Benny Mathurin playing half a game and then out for the rest of the week. We're talking Cade Cunningham scoring 8 points, playing 5 minutes, getting a collapsed lung. And just before his first game of the week, Anthony Edwards piecing out with a knee injury, which sucks. I think Şengün missed a game in there as well. It was an absolute disaster. I mean, you get this on the big jobs though, so it's fine. This is what SuperCoach is all about. You adapt, you change, you get wildly frustrated, and I think this is like a very specific week where we can speak to the frustrations of the NBA Supercoach game, right? When you're playing multiple games within a week's time frame, and there's like an inability to even use your bench players, it's just a bit ridiculous. And it's something they've got to look at, I think, for next year in terms of like the scoring, the roster construct, how the trades work with, once players have started that week, etc. For all the absolute guff around the NBL sort of half-assed edition of SuperCoach this year, I did actually like the fact that the difference maker could be the fact that you had a vice captain that scored double points and your captain scored triple points, right? It made sure that even if people had very similar teams, the combinations there within could give them very different scores. And it probably should be something that they look at for next year for NBA Supercoach. But also, the disaster of like load management and injuries, there's absolutely no way of getting around them right now as the game is constructed. So it's certainly something that needs to be looked at, and when it all goes pear-shaped on you like it did on me this week, you just sitting there going, what do I do, man? Like, I'm just going to get my head kicked in. So I lost all 3 of my league matches, 957, absolutely brutal. So I guess that's the big news, obviously, right? Ant-Man out for 1 to 2 weeks. Cade Cunningham out for at least 2 weeks. My man, Benny Mathurin, out. Giannis came back. Giannis is now out again. They're trying to shut him down. I talked about this on last week's show. It's why I wasn't trusting the Giannis sort of stuff, because I figured if anything else happened, they'd shut him down. That's exactly what happened. So hopefully we all dodged that. Jalen Johnson, I think, missed a game as well this week. He was in my team, misses the game against Golden State. I think Şengün missed the first Lakers game this week too against Houston. So, yeah, it was all over the shop, I'll tell you. Kawhi also had his sprained left ankle as we went into last week, and he only played 2 of 4 games for the Clippers. So it's an interesting one because it actually sort of depressed his price enough that I think we still might have gotten him on a slightly cheaper price maybe coming into this week. Oh, no, he still went up. Because he only played the 2 of the 4 games and he still scored 67. 67. Still, not bad. Anyway, so I guess very, very, very briefly with this week's show, you sort of look at the folks who scored the most. Luka was absolutely off his head. He obviously had the massive 60-point game. He scored 100 points in 2 games, right? He had the 40 and then the 60 against Houston. Ends up with a 163. You got 137 for Jokic. I had the C on him. That was fine. I wasn't entirely sure about the Luka thing. It was just that little bit risky with the captaincy on Luka, just in case he missed one of these games that they were playing on a back-to-back. They flew from Houston to Miami and boom, he played both and then dropped 60 in the second game. Absurd stuff. So good on him. 130 for Wemby. 124 for Amen Thompson. Had the tip-in game winner. the other day, which is pretty good against Miami. You've got Rudy Gobert, Zestafo Tower with 124, Donovan Clingan 121. Jaylen Brown finally popped off. He had a really good week, 121. LeBron James, 115. Nick Alexander-Walker, one of my favorite pods this week, 108. It was somewhat pushed up by like a really, really big game in there where he went off his head and had a career high. I think he scored 44 SuperCoach points in that one as well. Weirdly enough, Oso Iguodala for the Phoenix Suns was your 10th highest scorer this week with 107 because the Suns played 5 games. And this is the other thing that probably stymied my scoring a little bit. I had Jalen Green. I think by the time that we got to our trades last week, I'd moved on from... I moved Kawhi out thinking, all right, he'll miss a couple of games. I still had Benny Mathurin. Boom, Mathurin plays the first game, misses the rest of the week. And I was also sort of tossing between Devin Booker and Jalen Green, thinking Jalen Green might be a really good pod. If he pops, we're feeling good. Booker ends up 105, the 12th highest scorer of the week. And Jalen Green, not so much. I think he ended up with 74. Yeah, so 31-point difference, bit of a tough one. I mean, there is a pretty big price difference as well between the two of them, like $4 million. But anyway, so tough ones there. So going into this week, though, obviously the big stuff for SuperCoach, week in, week out, is pods, and B, your schedule. So the pods this week that obviously went off, Gobert, but no one's literally 0.3% of coaches have got them. When you got 2 center positions, essentially, right? Jokic, Wemby, lock and load. Donovan Clingan, he's in 1% of teams as well. It's very, very hard when Jokic and Wemby are obviously just going to be the clear high bang-on scorers week on, week out. And this is another thing about NBA Supercoach overall. It just shades so much advantage towards big rebounders, right? Because rebounds are very replicable game on game. There's not a giant fluctuation in numbers for the top rebounders. Versus top scorers, efficiency obviously dips, and we get pinged for missed shots. So if you have really efficient scorers, again, usually the big dudes, because they're much taller and obviously have a better field goal percentage a lot of the time, yeah, makes it a bit easier for the big fellas to score. But you can only start, obviously, a flex and a C. So, yeah, it's a bit of a strange one. Again, something they could be looking at in the offseason. LeBron was a pretty interesting pod this week, 3.4%. I did actually kick that around last week, but just wasn't sure about his numbers. And again, with that back-to-back in the middle of it, it was always going to be a bit of a rough one. Ayo Dosunmu, 0.3% of teams. I looked at him. I'm actually looking at him again for this week, but now they're on a 2-game week. It's just like, oh, that would have been nice. Well, too late. So now he's on a 2-game week. No good. Anyway, Jamal Murray is another interesting one for this week at 8.1%. Dyson Daniels had he had a career high 28 points the other day. A lot of steals. He scored a 101 and is in 4.4% of teams. Jalen Durant is another one, right? So with Cade Cunningham out, he's been very, very good. Scored 100 points this week. But again, with only two spots essentially for actual centers to play on your court, it's going to take a very brave person to go away from Wemby or Jokic in favor of Jalen Durant. So interesting favorite trade targets for this week. It comes from the players playing 4 games. And this week, we have a lot of them, which is very nice. We have, and this is what we will usually do, right? Trade targets for each of these teams as we go through it. But remember, with a limited amount of trades left, with only 3 weeks left in the NBA season, 3 rounds of SuperCoach left as well in NBA Supercoach, you kind of want to make sure that you're maximizing your players who are doubling up on four actual game weeks, etc. And so for week 21 and 22, there is a limited number of teams that do have the 8 total games across the 2 weeks, so just keep an eye out for those. But for week 21, Atlanta have 4 games. Jalen Johnson's the obvious one, but I do really like the POD of Nicky Alexander-Walker. Might be kicking the tires on that. Dyson Daniels isn't a bad one either. CJ McCollum is a very interesting one. He's been very solid, but I just don't know if he's got the upside. Brooklyn, look, that's just an absolute basket case. They shut down Michael Porter Jr. I'm just steering completely clear. Charlotte, they've got 4 this week. Con Knipple, awesome. LaMelo Ball might be a very interesting POD this week for the simple fact that he has the efficiency is something that obviously really hurts LaMelo. He scored 94 this week, but with 4 games this week, they play Sacramento in game 1. He's only in 2% of teams. He is a great pod, dart throw, and he's only at 12.4 mil. So it's certainly one that you'd be looking at. But again, the problem is because he's just tagged simply as a point guard, and we've already got SGA, Luka, and a bunch of other guys who are just point guards, there's actually not room to put him on your team in a lot of cases. So they play Sacramento, New York, Philly, and Boston this week. Not bad. So yeah, I really like LaMelo as a pod. Obviously, if you've got Con Knipple still in your team, that's still fine. Brandon Miller's an interesting one, but he just doesn't quite put up the rebounding numbers to keep his SuperCoach score high enough. Chicago, obviously Josh Giddey. I feel good about that. He's been playing pretty well, but again, with Chicago kind of getting to the end of their season, 10 more games to go or so, how much are they going to play Gids? I feel like they might want to kick the tires on some of the other dudes that they're basically auditioning for next season, so I'll be probably a little bit hesitant about that. Matthias Buzelis, he's been fantastic. The rest of their team, it's just absolute dart throw territory. Denver, obviously Jokic. Christian Brown, there's another pod that I really, really like this week. He's only in 0.4% of teams. He's priced very nicely. He had a really good couple of games there at the start of this week. He could do the same again. Obviously, Jamal Murray, we know that he's a bit bang or bust, but he has been very, very solid all year. Great average. You just sort of hope that he has that great week this week. Denver are going to be pushing super hard. They need to keep pushing through the end of the season for seeding. So you know that Jokic and Jamal will be going hammer and tongs. Don't mind Jamal. Interesting, weird price at 15 mil, but yeah, he's trustworthy to a degree, but he's also one of the most traded in players already this week. So there you go. Detroit, obviously that was Cade. Now it's Jalen Duren. The one that I do love that I'm probably going to bring into my team is Dennis Jenkins. Welcome back into the fold, Dennis. Maybe. We'll get to that later in the trades. But outside of that, Karis LeVert, none of these guys have otherwise stepped up. Golden State, Steph will be back later this week. Certainly one for maybe next week that we'll be looking at in terms of... I don't think Golden State actually have a 4-game week next week, though. So... yeah, it's a real bad sort of time. The rest of that team, Pods is still a bit of a pod, but yeah, his scoring hasn't been awesome. Houston, Amen Thompson, fantastic this week. KD, Alpi Şengün, they've all been very solid because they don't have a point guard. Reed Shepherd's been solid too. I'm just sort of hesitant of like, all right, Amen Thompson with 124, cool. I've already got KD and Şengün still in my team. I just don't know if I want to bring in another Houston player. They do have the 4 next week, though, so if you're going to have 3 of them, that's 3 spots on your team you don't have to touch for 2 weeks, basically. Indy, I'm steering completely clear as well because they're in Tankville. The Clippers, I might be bringing Kawhi back in this week, just saying. I do have Benny Mathurin sitting there still. He'll probably go to my bench. It sucks, but I mean, I'd like to have him on court just in case he comes back from his toe injury because he is a weapon. Miami, they've got 4, obviously Bam, Tyler Hero's a really interesting pod as well for me. But outside of that, Norm Powell has just come back. He's only played like 1 or 2 games. I don't know. It's just a bit weird. Jaime Jaquez has completely disappeared. Milwaukee, Giannis is gone. So I don't know. KPJ, maybe. Otherwise, yikes. Miles Turner's an interesting one. But again, with the C, there's no real point to that. Memphis, that's all their young dudes. But it's just so hit and miss with the likes of Jalen Wells and G.G. Jackson and Cedric Howard that I'm just sort of steering clear as well. New Orleans, I do like the idea of Sadiq Bey or Zion. Zion's a really interesting pod as well. One of the ones that I've got written down here, 1.4% ownership. Zion, I've always made the joke on NBA Straya that his stats are like his diet, full of empty calories. But that's not bad when it comes to SuperCoach. The problem is his rebounding numbers are not good enough to probably keep him up into that upper echelon, right? He can have these pop-off games where he just goes whack, but I'm a little bit more sort of hesitant about that, but I don't mind it as a good pod play. 1.4% of owners. Sadiq Bey I really like. DeJounte Murray as well, but we've got a lot of really good point guard opportunities out there. OKC, obviously SGA is coming back into my team this week. You just can't not have him, I think. J-Dub is another one that's coming back, but you can't really trust him until we get to see how he goes once he's returned. Otherwise, SGA, is the obvious sort of Cade replacement. If you can get up to him from the 17 odd mil from Cade to the 21 of SGA. Orlando, we talked about them. They've got like the awesome run home of 4-game weeks left, right, and center. Desmond Bain was a bit of a disappointment this week. Paolo wasn't too bad. I think he got to 95. The efficiency fluctuates a little bit too dramatically for Paolo for me, where if you can get Kawhi, who's maybe 1 or 2 mil more expensive than Paolo, the upside is probably a little bit higher, but at least if you just have Paolo, it's a bit of a set and forget for at least a couple more weeks. So, yeah. Bain, a little bit more hit and miss. He's had like a little bit of a soft, last 6 games, which is a little bit worrisome, but I sort of have gone back and forth on Desmond Bain, so we'll see what happens there. Portland, Deni Avdija, obviously he's still in only 8.5% of teams. Just have to be cautious about like how much he's going to play. Is he going to play all the games, still nursing that back injury, coming back from it? Otherwise, Donovan Clingan, obviously, as I mentioned, very good, but elsewhere, like Jeremy Grant, Tumani Kamara, Jrue Holiday, it's just none of it's really popping. Then you got Sacramento, and the one thing that I have kicked the tires on is just moving my beloved Maxi Renard onto the actual court at power forward. He's been putting up fantastic numbers. He's ripped off 3 straight 30-plus point games. He had a 95 this week. They've got 4 games this week, Sacramento. And I'm kind of just like, ooh, maybe I can do this. So he's actually still a bit of an on-court addition possibly this week. Just saying, Maxi Reno. I love him. Outside of that, DeMar DeRozan, Rusty Westbrook, yeah, I don't know. Sacramento stink. Toronto, Scottie Barnes is obviously you go to there. Everybody else is just that little bit too inconsistent for my liking. And Utah, look, best of luck trying to figure out who's actually going to play for them. They got a lot of their young dudes. If you look at Cody Williams, Elijah Harkless, they're putting up good numbers. Ace Bailey, if you've still got him floating around your team, he's been really good too. So that's your week 21 trade targets for all of those 4-game week teams. Week 22, who else has got a 4-game week? So the double up are Charlotte, Chicago, Detroit, Houston, Milwaukee, Memphis, Orlando, Toronto, and Utah. So if you are if you're light on trades, if you're trying to save stuff, let's keep an eye on those. They've got the 8 games across. So my favorite trade targets, I think this week, I think it's obvious like people are bringing in SGA, Amen Thompson, they're the Jamal Murray, they're the biggest sort of names being traded in. What I really do like, though, is just going the absolute top-notch, top echelon ones of SGA and Kawhi for me. Probably coming in as I sort of switch around Benny Mathurin from shooting guard to small forward. I'll probably keep Mathurin just for this week and pop him on the bench and just sort of hope that he plays. I mean, with the flex scoring as well, you do get that bottom score knocked off. So if Benny comes back, plays 3 games, whatever, I can maybe throw Dylan Harper on the court as well. He's still on my bench. We'll see how we go, but for the minute, I think having SGA come on, Dennis Jenkins maybe being on court as well, as I sort of finagle Kawhi into the small forward position. SGA comes in as well. Jenkins is the 3rd trade, I think, coming in for Jalen Green on the 2-game week for Phoenix. So the other one that I was sort of thinking about is obviously a Desmond Bain or Jamal Murray in place of Jenkins. And also trying to figure out if I can get Reynolds into the power forward spot, Jalen Johnson into the small forward next to KD, and then try to figure out what the sort of cheapest, decent-ish sort of swing shooting guard guy at around 10 mil for me could be. Christian Brown was the name that kept popping up. I'm like, I don't mind this. So I'm not wildly sort of sold on, all right, we're just going to go to SGA and Kawhi, but those top-notch, high, super-duper primos, at this point of the season, if you can just load up on all of them. So at this point, I'd have the team with Luka, SGA, Wemby, Kawhi, KD, Jalen Johnson, Şengün, Jokic. And then that last scoring spot would hopefully just be like either Jenkins going off his head without Cade there, Dylan Harper possibly taking the spot of Mathurin and then just going whack. But yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting sort of conundrum. I'm going to keep playing around with this until lockout tomorrow morning. But for the minute, SGA, Kawhi, Dennis Jenkins come in for Jalen Green, Cade Cunningham, and Ant-Man because we can't have nice things and they don't play. So that's pretty tough. Cash cows, I mean, yeah, basically at this point, you just need cash and warm bodies possibly. Jenkins has actually got a great break even. He's at 5.4 mil and I think his break even is 9. So I think in his last game, he managed to score 20? Yeah, he had a 31 against Golden State. He had 23 against Washington as well. So he's certainly not going to cost money. He might put up decent scores. We've seen him do that in Cade's absence already this season. So I feel okay about having Dennis on there. And even actually with a 4-game week, he's going to be playing hard. He gets weirdly okay amounts of rebounds as well as his assists. So just keep an eye on Dennis. Interesting little pod. But there you go. So I think that's what I'm looking at for this week. The luster has come off a little bit as the injuries all hit, and basically for me it becomes like a more meta conversation about how can we fix this game heading into next season now. But we're still in the top 1,000. That's fine. What are we at? what did I say, 765. So we can get this back up into the next, I don't know, top 600 again, top 500 again over the next 3 weeks. She'll be right. So anyway, keeping an eye on any other pods. As I said, like starting Reynaud on court feels like an interesting pod for me. I'll keep playing around with that, but I think for the minute, that's what I've settled on. SGA, Kawhi, and Dennis Jenkins. Some pretty interesting scoring there. So yeah, should feel okay. I think you look at also, like, I don't know, the actual schedules of some of these teams. There's some pretty interesting ones. You can look at the strength of schedule, etc., as they sort of finish the season. Some of the teams that actually have like decently okay runs home are the teams like the Clippers and Houston and Sacramento, and interestingly enough, Portland. So just keep an eye on Deni Avdija. But anyway, there you go. That is Jim Does SuperCoach for week 21. What a week it was. I can't believe we lost Ant-Man, Cade, and everybody else. Absolute chaos. But anyway, big thanks to Josh De Laurentiis for the intro and outro song. He rules. Go get around all of our other shows. So obviously, Jim Does SuperCoach. We've got the AFL SuperCoach show that comes out on Thursday. Just sort of basically talking through the team, etc. Talk about injury carnage. AFL SuperCoach has absolutely been turned on its head. But anyway, we also have NBA Straya still daily, so go check that out. And we have Footy Unfiltered, if that's your liking. AFL footy. Me and my buddy Jez carving it up each week as well, which is really fun. So there you go. Here's to a big week 21 in SuperCoach. Hopefully it's better than this week. I tell you what. All right. Happy SuperCoaching.